I saw humans charge into war, then understood fear. The first thing Ro noticed was the smell. He had been on dozens of military transports in his life. Vekai's ships smelled of cold, recycled air and sterilized metal. Clean, orderly, the kind of smell that reminded you that everything was under control. This ship smelled like food, sweat, and something sharp that he later learned humans called engine grease mixed with boot polish. It hit him the moment he stepped through the boarding corridor and stopped at the threshold of the troop hold. 42 humans sat inside. They were enormous. Not in the way Ro had read in the briefing files. The files had said average height, average mass, bipedal, oxygen-dependent. The files had made them sound like a moderate species. They were not moderate. They filled the hold the way rocks fill a river, solid, dense, present. Their armor was dark olive green, scratched and worn at the edges. Their boots were thick. Their hands were large. And they were loud. Two of them near the back were arguing about something called a card game. One of them, a broad soldier with a cracked visor pushed up on his forehead, was laughing so hard he was hitting the knee of the person beside him repeatedly. A smaller soldier, Ro would later learn her name was Paul, was sitting cross-legged on a supply crate, refolding a gray cloth over and over while humming something without melody. Ro stood at the threshold and held his data device against his chest. A hand appeared in front of him, big, blunt-fingered, palm open. "You must be our liaison." The woman attached to the hand was not tall by human standards, but she was solid in a way that suggested she had never once moved out of anything's path. Short dark hair, a scar running along the left side of her jaw, brown eyes that looked at him the same way they probably looked at everything, direct, measuring, patient. "Commander Dara," she said. "Ro," he said. He took her hand carefully. She shook it once firmly and let go. "You can sit anywhere that isn't claimed." She gestured at the hold. "We're moving in 8 minutes." He found a seat near the front, away from the noise. He set his data device on his knees and opened a new log entry. He wrote, "First contact sustained. Human soldiers do not appear to understand the nature of the engagement they are moving toward. Recommend observation continue before any assessment is filed." He stopped, read it again, deleted the second sentence. He had been assigned to this unit by the Confederation High Command 3 days after the Syndicate pushed the Vekai fleet back past the Corridor 7 line. The retreat had been fast, clean, and deeply humiliating. 17 Vekai ships lost. 2 colony outposts abandoned. The generals had called it a strategic reposition. Everyone else had called it what it was. The humans had offered to help. That part still confused Ro. The Vekai had not asked. The humans had simply sent a message to the Confederation High Command that said, in effect, "We heard you are losing. We would like to come." The Confederation had spent 4 days debating whether to accept. They accepted in the end because they had nothing else left to accept. Ro had been given one job: watch them, write down what they do, report back. He looked up from his data device. The soldier with the cracked visor had stopped laughing. He was now very carefully unfolding something from inside his chest armor, a small square of printed paper. He looked at it for a moment. Then he folded it back up and tucked it away and went back to talking. Ro wrote they carry personal objects, non-tactical, purpose unclear. Across the hold, Dara was standing over a holographic map table that 2 soldiers had assembled from a flat pack case. She was pointing at sections of the route with 2 fingers, speaking quietly. The soldiers around her nodded. No one looked worried. Ro had studied the same route that morning. It passed through a debris corridor that Syndicate scouts had been using for 3 weeks. The probability of an intercept was, by Vekai calculations, somewhere between 60 and 70%. He looked at the humans. They did not know this, or they knew it and had made a different calculation than he had. Either option was troubling in its own direction. He wrote, "These creatures do not appear to be afraid. I am trying to decide if this is confidence, ignorance, or something my training has not given me a word for yet. The transport shuddered as it undocked. The lights in the hold shifted from white to amber travel mode. The noise dropped slightly but did not stop. Someone started a different argument. Paul stopped humming and started eating something from a small, wrapped package. Roe closed his log and looked at the porthole beside him. The station fell away behind the glass. Stars appeared. He thought about the briefing he had received before boarding. The Syndicate heavy unit they were moving toward had destroyed 2 Vekai battalions in the last 6 weeks. It did not negotiate. It did not take prisoners worth mentioning. It was, the general said, the most dangerous ground force the Confederation had encountered in 40 years of conflict. He looked back at the hold. The soldier with the cracked visor was asleep. Paul had finished eating and was checking a medic kit with quiet efficiency. Dara had folded the map away and was now sitting against the far wall with her eyes closed, though Roe did not think she was sleeping. He opened his log again and added one more line. I hope I am wrong about all of this. Then the transport crossed into hyperspace, and the stars outside the porthole stretched into white lines, and Roe sat very still and waited for whatever came next. I saw humans charge into war, then understood fear. The ship dropped out of hyperspace wrong. Roe had been on enough transports to know what a clean exit felt like: a single deep shudder, a brief pressure change, then stable. This was not that. The exit came with a sound like tearing metal, then a hard roll to the left, then 3 consecutive impacts that knocked him sideways off his seat and onto the floor of the hold. The lights went red. What happened next took approximately 4 seconds. Roe would think about those 4 seconds for a long time afterward. In the first second, every human in the hold moved. Not panicked, not randomly. They moved like water finding a slope, instantly, without hesitation, toward specific places. Bren grabbed a ceiling brace with one arm. Paul had her medic pack on her back before the second impact finished. 2 soldiers Roe did not know names for yet had already pulled the side weapon racks open and were distributing rifles down the row. In the second, Commander Dara's voice came through the hold comms. She did not shout. She spoke the way someone speaks when they want to be heard clearly in a loud room. Ambush. We are taking fire from 2 Syndicate flankers off the port side. Pilots are attempting evasion. Brace for another hit. The second was the hit. It was worse than the first 2. The lights cut entirely for a moment, then returned at half strength, flickering. Somewhere in the wall behind Roe, something was burning. He could smell it. In the second, the humans started doing their jobs. Roe got back onto his seat and gripped the sidebar and looked at the hold around him. No one was frozen. No one was making sounds that suggested they had lost control of themselves. Paul was already moving toward a soldier who had hit his head on a brace. She had him by the chin, checking his eyes, moving on. Bren was at a side panel, pulling it open, running a fast damage check on the emergency systems. Dara appeared at the front of the hold. She had a rifle across her back now, a flat tactical screen in her hand. She looked at it once, looked up, spoke. Transport is compromised. Pilots are taking us down. There is a moon below Veth 9 mining origin abandoned. Low gravity old structures. We are landing there. Prepare for hard contact with the surface. Someone near the back said, How hard? Dara said, Hold on to something and find out. There was a brief sound that Roe would later identify as laughter. Then everyone held on to something. The landing was not a landing. It was a controlled fall that stopped suddenly. The transport hit the surface of Veth 9 at an angle, scraped across broken gray rock for approximately 300 meters, and came to rest half-buried against the base of a ridge. The hull on the right side was open to the sky. Cold, thin air moved through the hold. Roe sat with his hands braced on the seat in front of him and breathed. He checked himself. Nothing broken. He picked up his data device from where it had slid under his seat and stood. 3 humans had not survived the landing. A section of hull had come down fast and without warning. Paul was kneeling beside them. She stayed there for exactly the amount of time it took her to confirm there was nothing to be done, and then she stood and became a medic again and moved to the next person. Ro watched that. He did not know what to say about it, so he did not write anything yet. Outside the open hull, Veth-9 spread in every direction, flat, cold, gray-brown, with low ridges of shattered rock, and the skeleton of an old mining station about 400 meters to the north. The sky was dark purple. The sun was distant and pale and gave almost no warmth. The humans were already building a perimeter. It was remarkable to watch. There was no meeting, no long discussion. Dara pointed and soldiers went. 2 took high positions on the ridge above. 4 moved supplies out of the wreckage. Bren and another soldier started constructing a fast barrier from hull fragments and supply crates. It was as if they had rehearsed this specific situation on this specific moon with this specific broken ship. Ro moved outside and stood near the forming perimeter. The air tasted of cold rock and something chemical from the crash. His diplomatic uniform was not built for low-gravity outdoor environments, and he was already feeling the chill move through it. A hand appeared beside him, Bren, holding out a folded thermal layer. "You'll freeze in that," he said, not unkindly. Ro took it, "Thank you." Bren went back to the barrier without another word. Ro pulled the thermal layer on and looked north, toward the old mining station. It was a good defensible structure. He noted it. He was beginning to think in tactical terms, which was not his job. His job was observation. He opened his log and wrote, 3 dead. The others did not stop. I do not know if this is discipline or something else. I am going to need new words before this assignment is over. He looked out past the perimeter line, at the flat gray distance. He had run calculations on the survival probability before the landing and gotten 11%. He suspected the humans had run no such calculation, or they had run it and decided the number was not relevant information. The perimeter finished forming. Dara stood at the center of it, looking at a map overlay on her wrist screen. Then she looked up toward the eastern ridge and said nothing for a moment. Ro followed her eyeline. On the ridge, shadows were moving, syndicate ground units, a lot of them. Dara turned to her soldiers. She said 4 words. "They are coming, move." And the humans moved forward. I saw humans charge into war, then understood fear. Ro had studied 64 recorded ground engagements in his career as a liaison officer. He had read the reports. He had watched the footage. He believed he understood, in a functional way, what a battle looked like from the ground level. He did not understand anything. The syndicate force came over the eastern ridge in 2 columns, roughly 160 units, gray-armored, multi-limbed, moving in the tight lateral spread that their doctrine called a pressure formation. It was designed to push a smaller force backward, compress them, eliminate space for retreat. Ro had seen it used in 4 previous engagements. It worked every time. Dara looked at those 2 columns for approximately 3 seconds. Then she sent 12 soldiers left, 12 soldiers right, and walked forward with the remaining 18. Ro, who had absolutely no military training and no weapon, and no rational reason to follow, followed. The low gravity of Veth-9 changed everything. Ro had not fully understood this until he watched Bren take a running step and cover 4 meters in a single bound, landing light, immediately rebounding into the next step. The humans had adapted to it within minutes of landing. Their bodies seemed to recalibrate instinctively, adjusting stride length and launch angle the way they might adjust to uneven ground. They moved across the surface in long, silent, arcing strides that were deeply strange to watch, and he would realize later, deeply strange to fight against. The syndicate pressure formation expected resistance to come from a fixed point. A line of defenders, crouching, firing from cover, slowly giving ground. That was what every species they had fought had done. The humans did not form a line. They spread out wide, wider than felt safe, each soldier covering a large individual arc of ground. And then they moved toward the syndicate columns, not away from them. Ro crouched behind a low rock outcrop and watched with his amber eyes as wide as they would go. The syndicate front unit slowed. Their formation had no protocol for this. Every targeting system they used was built around calculating where prey would run. Prey ran away. Prey looked for exits. Prey's heart rate spiked, and their movement became erratic and predictable in its own panicked way. These creatures were not running. They were not spiking. They were coming forward in long, smooth, low-gravity bounds with their weapons up in their voices. Their voices were the part Ro had not expected. They were shouting. Not screaming. Not distress signals. Coordinated, directed shouts. Short sounds passed between soldiers that carried positioning information, target information, movement cues. It sounded to Ro like a language built for exactly this, like their species had spent a very long time learning how to talk to each other while running into danger. The syndicate left column hesitated. That hesitation cost them 4 seconds. 4 seconds was enough. Dara's left group hit the column's flank while it was still reorienting. They did not stop to form a firing line. They moved through the flank at a diagonal, firing while in motion, using the low gravity to bound over barriers and land behind positions before the syndicate units could track. Ro watched a soldier he did not know by name bounce off the side of a syndicate metal barrier, absorb the impact with both legs, and land firing in the opposite direction. It looked physically impossible. He was going to have to find a new word for impossible. Then he saw Orin. Orin had taken a direct energy hit to the left shoulder. Ro had seen it happen, a bright orange bolt, clean contact, the kind of hit that ended engagements for most species. Orin stumbled 1 step, turned his head, looked at his shoulder the way someone might look at a stain on their sleeve. And then he turned 45 degrees and used the stumble as momentum and went wide left to flank a syndicate position that had been about to fire on Bren. He did not stop. Ro sat behind his rock and felt something shift inside his chest. It was not a comfortable feeling. It was the feeling of understanding arriving without permission. The right column was breaking now. The syndicate units at the back were pulling away from the engagement. A retreat was beginning. Their front units were still fighting, but they had lost formation cohesion, and Dara's center group was pressing into the gap where their 2 columns had been trying to connect. Ro looked across the field. The syndicate had come with 160 units against 39 humans. They were retreating with roughly 80. The rest were down on the gray rock of Veth 9, not moving. He opened his data device. He tried to write. The human soldiers demonstrated effective use of low-gravity terrain and unconventional. He deleted it. He tried again. Human tactical doctrine appears to function by disrupting enemy prediction models rather than. He deleted that too. He sat for a while longer as the last syndicate units disappeared over the ridge, and the shouting across the field changed tone, from coordinated and sharp to something lower, checking in, calling names, getting answers. Paul was already moving across the field. Dara was standing at the center of the engagement area, looking north, making sure. Ro finally wrote 1 sentence. I think I have been afraid of the wrong things. He looked at it, left it, closed the device. Bren walked past him and paused, looking down at him crouched behind the rock. You good? Bren asked. Ro stood up carefully, brushed gray dust from his thermal layer, considered the question. I do not know yet, he said honestly. Bren nodded, as if that was a perfectly reasonable answer, and walked on. The cold sun of Veth 9 was low on the horizon. The field was quiet now except for the wind, which moved across the broken rock with a sound like breathing. Ro stood in the middle of it and tried to reorganize everything he thought he knew. I saw humans charge into war, then understood fear. Nobody told Ro about the ritual. He stumbled into it by accident. He had been walking the edge of the camp, looking for a signal strong enough to transmit his log to the Confederation relay, when he came around the corner of a broken mining wall and stopped. Bren was standing alone, facing the rock wall, both hands flat against it, not leaning, not resting, just standing there with his palms against the stone and his forehead lowered and his eyes closed. He was not making any sound that Ro could hear. Ro stepped back quietly so as not to disturb him. He found out later from Paul that this was simply what Bren did when he needed to be still. It had no formal name. It was not a species-wide practice. It was just Bren's thing, developed sometime in the last 4 years of service, a private way of putting himself back together between one hard thing and the next. Paul told him this while rewrapping her own hands, a habit, she explained, from before she was a medic, when she had trained in a physical contact sport that Ro had never heard of. She rewrapped her hands at the end of every day whether they needed it or not. She said it helped her keep track of herself. Ro sat across from her in the amber light of the camp's temporary panels and wrote in his log, "They have private systems, individual ones, things they do only for themselves that have nothing to do with orders or tactics. I did not expect this from a military unit." The night on Veth 9 was cold in a specific way, not violent cold, but deep and settled, the kind that came from a world that had never had enough sun to store any warmth. The camp was built inside 3 walls of the old mining station, which blocked the wind but not the temperature. Everyone wore their full gear. Dara came and sat near Ro without announcement. She had a small heat flask that she held in both hands. She looked at the camp around them for a while, not saying anything. Ro had learned in 2 days that this was not unusual for her. She was a person who spoke when she had something to say and was otherwise quiet in a way that felt considered rather than cold. "You're always writing," she said. "That is my function," Ro said. She nodded. "What have you written about today?" He thought about it. "That your soldiers do not behave the way I expected after a fight." "How did you expect them to behave?" Vekai soldiers, after a significant engagement, are given a full rest cycle. They are assessed by a medical team. There are formal procedures for processing combat stress. It is a structured recovery. He paused. Your soldiers made food. Bren played a card game for 40 minutes. Paul reorganized her medic kit 3 times. Dara looked at the flask in her hands. "That is how they process it," she said. "Doing something with their hands, being normal for a while. The card game isn't about the card game." "What is it about?" "Being around people, hearing noise, remembering that things can be ordinary," she shrugged. "It works." Ro looked at the card game across the camp. Bren was losing based on his expression and was apparently finding this very funny. The soldier across from him, a quiet one named Fate who had barely spoken since the crash, was also, faintly, smiling. "Commander," Ro said, "why do your soldiers carry personal items into combat? The items have no tactical value. In most military doctrines they are prohibited as distractions." Dara turned the flask in her hands once. "We had that doctrine, it didn't work." "What replaced it?" She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "We found that soldiers who had something to come back to fought differently from soldiers who didn't. Not better at tactics, but better at continuing. They could absorb more and keep going because in the back of their mind there was something waiting for them, something real." She looked at him. "The photograph in Bren's armor is his daughter. She is 4 years old. She drew him a picture of their dog before he deployed. He has carried it in 3 separate postings." Ro was quiet. "He is not fighting for the Confederation," Dara said, not unkindly. "He is fighting so that she does not have to." Later that night, Bren found Ro sitting near the perimeter and sat down beside him without being invited, which Ro had also come to understand was a human custom of friendship rather than intrusion. "Can I ask you something?" Bren said. "Yes." Do your people Vekai, do you believe something happens after you die? Ro considered the question seriously. We believe in continuation of pattern, he said. The idea that the things a person does reshape the world around them and those reshapings continue beyond the individual life. Not a soul, more like an impression left in water. Bryn thought about this. I like that. What do humans believe? Bryn tilted his head. Depends on the human. Personally, he stopped. Personally, I try not to think about it too much. I focus on the part I can do something about. He reached into his chest armor and took out the folded photograph. He looked at it for a moment and then held it out to Ro. Ro took it with both hands. Two children, very small, soft-faced, caught mid-laugh, and a large brown dog on a wooden step. Warm light. A ordinary afternoon preserved in a flat printed square that had been folded and unfolded so many times the creases had gone white. Ro held it for a moment. He felt the weight of it, which was almost nothing, and the weight of it, which was enormous. He passed it back with both hands, carefully, the way Vekai returned sacred objects after handling them. Bryn looked at him when he did that. Something passed across his face, not surprise exactly, but something close to being seen in a way he hadn't expected. He put the photograph away. They sat for a while in the cold of Veth-9, not talking, which was its own kind of conversation. I saw humans charge into war, then understood fear. The orders came through Ro's relay device at 3:40 station time. He read them twice. Then he sat on the edge of his cot in the extracted forward base on Chorus IV and read them a third time, hoping the words would change. They did not change. The message from Confederation High Command was precise and professional and careful in the way that messages are when the people writing them do not want to say plainly what they are actually asking. It directed the human battalion to take and hold a forward position on the flat plain east of the Chorus IV settlement, a position that required them to stand between the main Vekai force and the incoming Syndicate heavy armor column, while the Vekai units completed a repositioning maneuver to the south. The repositioning would take approximately 6 hours. The Syndicate heavy armor column would reach that position in approximately 6 hours. The math was not complicated. Ro was supposed to deliver the orders. That was his job. He was a liaison, a messenger, a bridge, a professional presence with no authority over operations and no business having opinions about what he carried. He sat with the orders for 40 minutes. Then he went to find Dara. She was in the map room, a sectioned-off corner of the forward base with 3 holographic displays and a folding table. She was alone, which was unusual. She was looking at the Eastern Plain map with the kind of focused stillness that meant she had been looking at it for some time. Ro stepped inside. I have orders from Confederation High Command. I know, she said. He stopped, you know. She turned from the map. We read the same tactical feeds you do, Ro. We've known since this morning what the generals were going to ask. He felt something cold that was not the recycled air of the base. Then you understand what they are asking. Yes. He looked at her. I need to tell you, I am not supposed to tell you this, but I need to tell you the repositioning buys them 6 hours and they are not planning to send support within that window. You would be. A wall, she said, not bitterly, just accurately. They need a wall while they move. Ro's hands tightened around his data device. I cannot in good conscience deliver these orders without making sure you understand the full situation. Dara studied him for a moment with those direct brown eyes. Then something shifted in her expression, not softness exactly, but something like recognition. You violated your mandate to tell me this, she said. Yes. She nodded slowly, thank you. She turned back to the map. We're doing it. Commander. But not the way they planned it. She touched 2 points on the map. If we hold a static line on the open plain for 6 hours against heavy armor, we lose. That's just the math. But the old canal infrastructure 2 kilometers north runs perpendicular to the armor column's approach vector. If we channel them through a narrowed front, we take away their spread formation advantage. We can hold a narrow front with 39 soldiers in ways we can't hold an open plain. She pulled the map wider and started marking positions with her finger, fast and certain. We'll need to fall back twice to draw them into the canal corridor. Controlled retreat. Then we hold at the third line. Rowe looked at the map. He was not a military mind, but even to him the shape of it was visible. The canal approach compressed the syndicate armor. A compressed column could only attack from the front, not from the flanks. A small force with no retreat options could hold a narrow front. The generals did not account for the canal, he said. No, Dara said. They planned for us to die on the open plain. We're going to make their plan work by not following it. Rowe looked at her. She was already walking out to brief her soldiers. The battle for Chorus IV began 4 hours later. Rowe had no weapon and no role in it. He stayed at the northern edge of the canal line and watched and wrote, and sometimes stopped writing because watching was enough. The first retreat was controlled and clean. Dara's soldiers pulled back through the ruins of an old irrigation gate, and the syndicate armor followed, tightening its formation to fit the corridor exactly as she had predicted. The second retreat took 40 minutes of sustained fire and cost 2 soldiers wounded, neither critically. Paul moved between positions continuously, always low, always fast. At the third line, the humans stopped retreating. They held for 5 hours and 40 minutes. Rowe could not find adequate language for what he watched during those hours. He wrote fragments. He crossed them out. He wrote them again. He wrote, I have watched Bren reload his weapon 14 times in the last hour, and each time his hands are steady. I do not know where that comes from. He wrote, Oren is still here. His shoulder injury from Veth 9 is not fully healed. He has not mentioned it once. He wrote, Dara has not sat down. She has been standing at the line for 4 hours, and she does not appear to be getting tired in the way that I am getting tired simply watching her. Then he wrote, I could not leave. I want to note this in the record. I was not ordered to stay. I stayed because I could not make myself go somewhere safer while they were here. At hour 5, the Syndicate heavy armor column stopped advancing. Not because it was destroyed, because it had taken enough attrition in the narrow corridor that its tactical programming assessed the engagement as non-recoverable. It pulled back to regroup. 30 minutes later, the Vekkai repositioning was complete. The generals sent a formal acknowledgement of the battalion's performance. They did not mention the canal approach. They did not mention that their original plan would have killed everyone here. They used the word effective. Rowe was sitting against a canal wall when Paul found him and told him he had a graze wound on his left arm that he had apparently not noticed. He looked at it. She cleaned it and wrapped it without asking his permission, the way she did everything, efficiently, without ceremony. You stayed, she said, not a question. Yes, he said. She tied off the wrap and moved to the next person. Rowe leaned his head against the canal wall and closed his eyes and felt the solid stone behind him and the cold Chorus IV air on his face, and listened to the humans around him, checking in, calling names, getting answers, and thought about the word effective. He thought it was the most inadequate word he had ever read. I saw humans charge into war, then understood fear. The report had been due for 3 days. Rowe had started it 11 times. Each time he got a few sentences in and stopped, because what he was writing was not what had been asked for, and he was not sure how to write what had actually been asked for without lying. The Confederation High Command wanted a tactical assessment. They wanted it in the standard format, Species capabilities, observed behavioral patterns, recommended integration protocols, limitations noted, threat assessment if applicable. Clean, structured, usable. He sat at the small desk in his quarters on Corridor 7 station, the same station where this had all begun, 6 weeks and an entire different life ago, and looked at the blank document and tried once more. He wrote, "The human soldiers of Commander Dara's battalion demonstrated consistent high performance across 2 engagements separated by." He stopped. He thought about Bren's hands, steady on the 14th reload. He thought about Paul, sitting alone on Veth 9 after the crash, staring at the dark sky with her arms on her knees. He thought about Orin, walking on a shoulder that should have stopped him. He thought about Dara, standing at a canal wall for 4 hours because she had made a decision, and she was going to be present for every consequence of it. He deleted the sentence. He wrote the real report. It took him most of the night. He did not use the standard format. He used plain language, the way Dara spoke, the way Bren asked questions, direct and without decoration. He wrote what he had seen and what he had understood, and what he believed the Confederation needed to know before they used these people again, which they would because they would need to. He wrote, "Human soldiers are not fearless. This is the first thing you must understand and the thing most likely to be misunderstood. They feel fear the same way all living things feel fear. They simply have a different architecture for it. Their fear points outward, toward the people and things they are protecting, rather than inward, toward their own survival. This is not a tactical quirk. It is a fundamental difference in how they are built, and if you do not understand it, you will waste them." He wrote, "Do not lie to them. They will know. They read terrain, they read tactical maps, they read the shape of an order the way a doctor reads a symptom. They knew at Chorus IV what the original plan was. They did it anyway, but they did it their way, and their way was better. If you had told them the truth from the beginning, you would have gotten the same result with less waste. Honesty with humans is not a courtesy. It is an operational necessity." He wrote, "Do not stand behind them. In Vekai doctrine, leadership remains at a protected position to maintain command continuity. Human commanders do not do this. Commander Dara held the front line at Chorus IV for nearly 6 hours. Her soldiers were better for it. I do not fully understand the mechanism, but I observed it clearly when the humans could see their commander present and in the same danger. Something in them consolidated. They became harder to move, harder to break, harder to stop. I have no tactical term for this. I am simply reporting what I saw." He wrote, "They carry photographs and small personal objects into combat. Every military assessment I have read calls this a vulnerability. I am telling you it is the opposite. Those objects are the reason they can absorb what they absorb and continue. They are not distractions. They are anchors. The photograph in Bren's chest armor is his daughter. He has fought through 2 significant engagements and 1 crash landing with that photograph against his heart. He did not fight well despite it. He fought well because of it." He wrote the final summary paragraph, and then sat back and read it over and decided he would send it as it was, consequences aside. The summary said, "Do not waste them. Do not lie to them. Do not ever, under any circumstance, use them as a wall and call it strategy without telling them first, because they will know and they will adapt and they will survive, but they will remember that you put them there. The only thing more dangerous than a human going to war is a human who has decided you are not worth dying for. Keep their trust. You will not find it again once it is gone." He sent the report. Then he got up and walked to Corridor 7, because he had heard through the base comms that Dara's battalion was redeploying this morning. He wanted to see them off, though he would not have been able to explain to any Vekai colleague why that mattered. They were in the same corridor where he had first seen them, the same loud, dense, solid presence. Someone was arguing about the card game. Someone else was eating. The smell of boot polish and food and human activity filled the corridor in the way that a certain kind of warmth fills a room, not temperature but presence. Dara saw him first. She walked over and stood in front of him and did not say anything for a moment. Ro reached into his uniform pocket and took out a small, smooth gray stone with a white line running through it. He held it out to her. She looked at it. "Among Vekai," he said, "this is a travel stone. You give it to someone you expect to see again." She picked it up from his palm, turned it once in her fingers, put it in her pocket next to the photograph without a word. That was exactly right. That was the correct way to receive it. Bren appeared at her shoulder. "You coming with us?" "I have to file my report," Rose said. Bren looked at him steadily. "File fast." He turned and went back to his unit. Dara looked at Ro for one more moment, then gave him a single nod and followed her soldiers. Ro stood at the corridor window and watched the transport lift away from the docking ring. He watched it until it was a point of light against the dark, and then until it was nothing. He was not afraid anymore. He was not sure exactly when that had changed. Somewhere between a crash landing on a gray moon and a canal wall on Chorus IV and a photograph of 2 children and a dog, he had stopped being afraid of the things he had come on this assignment afraid of. He was something else now. He did not have a word for it yet. He thought he would find the word eventually. He had time. He turned from the window and walked back to his desk to file fast.